Okay, now I think we're good. Um, so, hi Shannon.
Hi.
Let me introduce you to everybody who is on. So Shannon and I met when she was stationed here she and her husband were stationed here in the Washington, D.C. area. Shannon Burke is an Air Force veteran and military spouse and a mom of three boys, ages 21, 18, and 15. She also was an emergency room registered nurse for 26 years. When she started her business, she was still doing that, and she's now retired. And she's currently living in Tampa, Florida. But as she says, she's moved 21 times as an adult, which is crazy. That's military life, right?
I think I'm in Tampa, I should say.
Oh, that's fantastic. So, yeah, well, I'm jealous because I'm in DC, and it's kind of this week is pretty pretty cold. um, so Shannon, tell us a little bit about a little bit more about yourself and kind of how you learned about Rodan and Fields.
Yeah. So we, like I said, are a military family. My husband's now retired as well from the Air Force. But at the time that I started my business, we were actually stationed in Japan. And we were stationed on a tiny little island called Okinawa. And there was really a huge monopoly on jobs, if I'm being honest. Certainly as a registered nurse, I've never had a shortage of jobs, especially as an ER nurse. But when I got to Okinawa, that was no longer the case. I couldn't get a job in the emergency room because the military community really had a hold on all of those jobs. And so I took a job that was available, completely out of my wheelhouse. And although I was very good at it, I just was completely unfulfilled. And if I'm being honest, I just really kind of resented going to work every day. And at the time, my kids, who are, gosh, now two of them are adults. One's actually in the Air Force now. But at the time, they were all sixth grade and younger. And so I had, a kindergartner, a third grader, and a sixth grader. And my husband was deployed to, the desert for 6 or 9 months. There's been too many of those. I can't remember which one that was, but he was deployed. And I was working literally 10, 11 hours, 5 days a week. And so other people were raising my kids. And I was sort of okay with that. Don't get me wrong. That makes me sound like a horrible mother. I was sort of okay with that because I love working. I love having an occupation. I certainly loved being a nurse. But I wasn't used to doing that 5 days a week. And so I really kind of the turning point for me was one morning, before the sun came up. I was taking the kids to like a before school program. And my middle son, who's now, well over 6 foot tall, but at the time was, like thigh high. And he just grabbed onto my leg and looked up at me with the biggest crocodile tears and begged me not to go to work. And I'd never, like, my kids have known me to be a nurse. Like, mommy works holidays, mommy works weekends, mommy sometimes works night shifts. And it was the first time that I just thought, oh my God, like I am truly sacrificing my children just for the sake of a job. And I didn't have to. And so it was really that day that I just kind of thought, something's got to give here. So I really just was looking at anything. I was considering grad school. Maybe I could teach nursing because I could do from just about anywhere. I was really just, like I said, looking at a lot of different options. And I actually was introduced to it by a mutual friend of ours, actually, Jen Griswold, who we had been stationed with in California previously. And yeah, she introduced me to it. So I thought, what the heck? Why not?
So what impressed you? I mean, what did she, I guess, what did she tell you, and what really impressed you about it?
I'll be really forthcoming with you. Nothing impressed me about the idea of running a business at all. I'm a nurse. Like I heal people. I take care of people. And, I've worn a lot of hats as a grown up and as a kid, but nursing for me, that's a part of my name. I mean, even today, if somebody says, what do you do? I say, I'm a retired nurse, but I'm like, I will always be a nurse. That's part of my DNA. So the idea of running a business didn't immediately strike me. And in fact, and Jen knows the story, so I feel okay sharing it. I was training for a half marathon at the time. And by training, I mean, I was out running a couple days a week. Like I really wasn't training. But I told her, I said, and of course, this is back in the day when all we had was emails. And I told her I was training for a marathon and I was a little too busy to have a conversation. So needless to say, what got me is I knew Jen. And I knew her to not only be incredibly smart, but I also knew her to be somebody that I didn't expect to do something like this. And so that just kept ringing in my head. And of course, she'd sent me a little bit of information about it. So I didn't really understand the company or kind of what they were after, but I understood the founders and I understood their reputation. I certainly had never used Proactive, but I grew up in the Proactive days. Well, I shouldn't say that, I was older, but I certainly knew of it. And I just thought, as a nurse, I understand the reputation of these two physicians. And now I have a smart friend who's doing it. I have nothing to lose here. And if I'm also being very honest, my skin was a hot mess. I mean, I was in my early 40s and I'd never taken care of my skin. I didn't grow up with sunscreen. I didn't hide from the sun. I sought it out. And so I really had gotten to a point for the first time in my life where I was like, yeah, I don't really love what I see in the mirror right now. So the combination of not liking my skin, certainly understanding that this might be a smart opportunity, and really just being completely unfulfilled at work and not seeing my children, I was like, this is the perfect storm. So I couldn't say no.
Gotcha. That's a great story. So what were some of your biggest concerns when you were starting out, or before you actually, decided to jump in?
I'll be really honest with you. I didn't have a lot of major concerns. I certainly had some logistical concerns. I lived in Japan. We didn't have the kind of technology that we have nowadays. I mean, Zoom was not a thing. I had to pay a lot of money just to have phone calls back to the States at that time. So logistically speaking, I was a little concerned about that. But I think more importantly, I won't use this word really hardly in the sense that I didn't feel intimidated by the idea of a business. What I did worry about is I'm kind of a guy's guy. Like, I don't wear makeup typically. I had never used skincare before. I'm not a real girly girl. And, I have 3 sons, but I also grew up with 5 older brothers. Like, I'm a bit of a tomboy. And I really just thought, is this even going to be believable? Like, will people even, like, Shannon's coming to me with skincare? Like, come on. So, that was kind of an initial obstacle in my brain, which I quickly realized was a silly obstacle because it has nothing to do with what I do. It's just the fact that we all have skin, and it makes super smart sense because it doesn't matter what my concerns are with my skin. I only know that other people have them as well. So honestly, I feel like those are really the biggest things. And maybe there was a small element as a military spouse of kind of being that girl. I think a lot of people non-military as well have that, I don't want to be that girl. But I will say that a lot of my military spouse friends, especially overseas, because there is such a huge monopoly on jobs, many of us who are well educated, have great professions, can't work overseas, just simply because of, language restrictions, whatever, availability, you name it. There were a lot of friends that I knew that were doing other like businesses and failing. And, so there was definitely that thought, like, oh, I don't know how this is going to go. But really, those were the big ones. And I kind of quickly learned that they were not really valid concerns at all.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, obviously, yeah, you've been very successful, and the whole military community, I think definitely benefits from this business. And so,
100%.
actually, related to that, how has, being a military spouse, being in the military yourself, like, how has it affected um, your business?
I would say in only positive ways, really. Um, I'll never forget. When I was in Japan, I hit a certain title in the company that afforded me a trip to our corporate offices in San Francisco, and so I was literally the first person in our company to do this overseas, let alone earn these kinds of trips. And so when I got there, we were sitting down at a fancy dinner, and our previous chairman came and sat next to me, and he asked me that question, and I hadn't really given it any thought, but instantly I thought the best part about this is actually being military, because we have so many connections. I mean, I've lived on 4 continents. I have connections everywhere. I've traveled the globe, um, and I've moved 21 times as an adult. So while there's certainly some logistical issues in terms of moving that often, and they're not always pleasant, in terms of business, I would say that's probably hands down been the best part. Um, I mean, look, that's how you and I met. I wouldn't have met you had we not been stationed in DC. So, I think in that regard, that's probably the only, I wouldn't say there's any negatives really, as far as being military and being in a business like ours. It's only been beneficial. I've met people, those people have brought connections to me. But being able to, kind of globally launch this business in 2 countries that I've lived in Australia, I've lived in Japan. That's been incredible. So yeah, I would say that's definitely been a huge plus.
Yeah, yeah, and of course, having just the seamless nature of it, right? Like, you don't have to pick
Right.
up, you can just pick it up and go, and you don't have to like open up a shop everywhere you go.
Well, and that's conversely, I would say that's actually been the best part about business, in the sense that we're military. So kind of the opposite end of that is I've now had 6 seamless moves with a continual paycheck. I've never lost a day of work. Uh, in fact, I'm making money while I'm traveling, while I'm sleeping. And I've literally moved 6 times, from Japan to the States, from the States to England, from England back to the States, and now down here. It's been seamless. And so, yeah, I would say that certainly this business has been hugely positive on us as a military family as well.
Yeah, yeah, and actually, I'd love to. That was my next question. You're reading my mind. I was going to ask, what has it been, what has this business done for you and your family? How has it impacted you, and maybe even people, obviously, people beyond your family?
Yeah, well, I mean, I can speak personally, in the sense that I think what it's truly done for us is it's again given us, as a military family, that seamless move. My husband's was in the military for 34 years. He never had to, find a job. He never had to do any of those things. He just literally moved up to the next thing. And for the first time, I kind of got that. I was like, wow, this is great. Like, I get to manage my household, and I'm actually still working, but I'm getting to do that from home. So that has been absolutely incredible. I think ultimately there's just so many incredible benefits to a business like this, um, particularly for those of us that move so often. It's hard to even put it all, get it all out of my mouth. Really, it's really just been one positive thing after another, honestly. Did I answer your question? I feel like I didn't even answer your
Yeah,
question.
yeah. Well, I do have a question about, that's great. And, obviously, like, you said, it's the benefits are endless. And, and maybe like we have a few more minutes, and if something, else comes up, please, let me know. But one other thing I was going to ask you, what challenges have you um, faced, in this business, and how have you been able to overcome them?
Well, I think challenges in general in the business are we are a people business. And truth be told, people aren't always easy to deal with. I mean, it's just the, stone cold truth. And I would say that's probably been the biggest challenge is, as you know, our job is not to manage people. It's not to supervise people. It's not, we're here to help, to encourage, to coach, to mentor. That's all stuff that I love. And even as a nurse, I used to teach nursing students and paramedic students, and I love that piece of our business. But I would say that, certainly in terms of challenges, that's probably been the biggest for me personally as well. Obviously, just logistics sometimes. Living on a different time zone might make, challenging conversations even harder because you're dealing with that. But I would say for business in general, that's really been the most difficult part. And I wouldn't even say it's difficult. It's just probably the biggest challenge. And I think the way that, I've learned to deal with that is manage my own expectations of people and myself, and, learn how to pivot really well. you know, we're dealing with humans, as you know, we're all vastly different, and some experiences are better than others. And that's that's really all you can do, just learn to kind of roll with it, pivot where you need to, and, manage expectations.
Yeah, yeah. Speaking about pivoting, that's something that I think all business owners have to do,
Sure.
regardless of the kind of business they're in, right? Um, so what is the biggest lesson you've learned about being a business owner?
That's also a hard one to answer. Um, I don't know that I have a biggest lesson. I have a lot of small lessons. I've learned that I'm incredibly strong, even though I kind of knew that I was already. This is certainly a lane of traffic I've never been in, and kind of learned that, yeah, I'm pretty darn good at it. So that's a small lesson I learned. I've learned, again, that you have to learn how to pivot and, take certain situations with grains of salt, including people. That's my husband coming to say hello. Uh, how do
Hi.
I, sorry,
Beautiful flowers.
I see that. Um, I think too, another thing that I've learned is that people are good. Uh, Again, that makes me sound really cynical. It's not though I didn't know that before, but I will tell you in the nursing profession, after doing it for 26 years, probably the last 5 years of my career, I really noticed a lot of seasoned nurses were eating their young. And it just really made no sense to me, and really left me feeling without a real sense of community, because I never felt that way. I want to nourish the young. These are up and comers. Like, I want them to be better than me. So, that was something I learned with this business in particular is like people are pretty incredible. The support that I got, especially being overseas, um, the community of people that had this like instant family that I mean, it was shocking. It was shocking. It really was. And even today, I have a hard time putting into words just how much that meant to me. I didn't know I needed that. I didn't know I was lacking it. I didn't even know I wanted it. But then I got it all. And I was like, holy cow, like, who knew? This was so cool. Um, so yeah, I mean, there's been so many great lessons. Um, but I honestly, I think that's probably the best one of all of it is people are awesome.
I agree. I agree about the
Yeah,
community, and yeah, and I think nobody really realizes that until, I think they can see only so much from the outside, right? And
right.
it may seem kind of funny, or weird, but once we're here, it's something that um, is
What do people
kind
say? You drink the Kool-Aid? Like, there's no Kool-Aid here. This
right.
is not Kool-Aid. This is just how things should be. This is how my nursing profession should have been. This is how every community should be. You know, yeah,
Yeah.
it's an odd thing to discover because it seems now that I have it, like, why isn't this everywhere? But it's just not.
I agree with you. I tell people all the time, I've never been around so many supportive people,
Mm,
that just
never.
cheer you on, and like regardless of where you are, what team you're on, they're going to be rooting for you and supporting
Yep,
you. Um,
100%.
yeah, yeah. And what I have a couple more questions. One is, what do you think has made you, and I think you've kind of shared a little bit about that, but like specifically a couple of things that you think have made you successful in this business.
Listen, I don't think this is for everybody. That's the first thing I should say. Um, just like not everybody should be a nurse, not everybody should be a teacher, not everybody should be in the military, this is not for everybody. It's not for the faint of heart. And I think, again, that goes back to the discussion we had a little bit ago about the fact that we're in the business of humans. And that's not always fantastic, you know? So I think certainly that's something that, people need to have, the ability to kind of let it roll, take a deep breath and move on. But I also think, just strategically, you need to have certainly a sense of self-motivation. You have to be able to not get sucked into a lot of the white noise that can happen throughout the day. You have to be able to make this your priority, because if it's your business and it's your income and it's all the things, then it has to be important. And I think because it's done from wherever we are, whether that's at home or a coffee shop or traveling on vacation with our families, we still have to check in with our businesses every day, if you want it to be successful. And that doesn't mean you have to spend hours at a time. It just means you got to be checked in. And I think that's hard for a lot of people. I think if you don't have the dedication to kind of do those things on your own, if you're not having to show up for somebody else, then that's hard for a lot of people. So I think you have to have grit, you have to have determination, you have to have desire, you have to have the ability to, like we talked about earlier, pivot. You have to have the ability to kind of just go, yeah, this is all new. I'm going to learn as I go, and I'm going to take some chances and see what happens. I think it certainly, like I said, I think there's some personality traits that are invaluable in a business like ours. But I also think that it's really more for a lot of people than it isn't for a lot of people. I just don't think people realize maybe that it's something that they can do, you know?
Yeah, yeah. So you kind of answered a lot of questions, just throughout the conversation. I know. And one last thing is, if you do you have any parting advice for maybe somebody who is kind of toying with the idea of starting their own, Rodan and Fields business, or maybe even any business.
Yeah, I mean, I think here's the thing: don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to succeed. And I know those are, it's really sounds a little callous to just say it that way, but those are things you have to have. Um, I think with any business, you have to understand that it's not personal. Um, Again, we're in a people business, and so dealing with people, it's really easy to kind of go, oh, well, they must not like me anymore, or you know, whatever. It has nothing to do with you personally. So I think, especially if you're going to start a business like this that's not brick and mortar, you have to be willing to kind of say, this is different, and you have to learn how to treat. This is my office. I have to treat my office like my office, whether I drive to it or not. Um, and I wouldn't take it personally if I had a patient that yelled at me in the emergency room. Well, that happened all the time. Uh, so I have, as a business like this in particular, you have to just learn to not take things personally. Um, Gosh, there's so many things that I think you and I both could equally say, we'd probably agree on every single thing. Um, I just think, this is very different for a lot of people, and different, scary. Um, and I think what people should do rather is, instead of being afraid and then not doing anything about it, I think people need to learn to kind of walk into that, that big dark hole and be afraid. And I tell, people who join me in business, I tell them all the time, if you weren't worried or you weren't nervous or you weren't scared, then this isn't important enough for you. Like,
Yeah.
those are all emotions that you should have, because it's important, and because you care, and because you want this to work. So, you have to understand that again, this is very different than a traditional kind of business, although I think this is now more the norm, especially with COVID.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I just think you have to, you really have to just understand that it's going to be scary and kind of run with it. I mean, if nothing changes, nothing changes. I love that. I don't know who I just quoted, but I love that quote, because it's so true. If you don't do anything, then nothing else will happen. You got to try things. And my dad, who's now deceased many years, but he was a bit of a serial entrepreneur. I never realized it until I kind of became one myself. Um, he did a lot of things throughout my life, but the one thing that he used to always say is, you have to take risks. If you don't take risks, you're never going to reap any benefits. You're never going to see a reward. So, and another thing that he used to teach me, this is probably good for any business owner: no excuses. Don't make excuses. I, these are all personal life skills that most of us have. I think that's what can make anybody successful in a business. You just have to be willing to take the chance and learn as you go, and realize that, again, nothing changes if nothing changes.
That's right. That's right. And one last question
Yeah.
that I think is important. How long would you say someone should give themselves to really understand whether or not this is their cup of tea, and that they, to feel comfortable? How long did it take you to sort of become more or less comfortable in this, as a, as an entrepreneur? And then what would you tell people, how long they should give this?
Um, I think nothing happens overnight, so that's important to know. Something that, we as a company, and as, business owners in this particular company, talk about all the time is, this is a marathon, not a sprint. I mean, I think that's pertainable to probably any business. I think, considering we don't have overhead, we don't have brick and mortar, because this business is really, you get to walk right in it and not worry about those things. You have to also understand that it can take longer than you might want it to. We're dealing with people. That's, again, the biggest challenge, right? And so I can just tell you personally, I I did okay for probably a year and a half. And in the sense of okay, I mean, I I had a lot of happy customers who were using skincare. But I didn't grow a team for 2 years into my business. And that was really just a mindset click for me. I had to realize why it wasn't happening, and then I made it happen, and then literally hit the ground running and have never looked back. Um, I know a lot of super successful people in this company in particular who did it very quickly, but I also know a lot of super successful people who didn't start out quickly. And you know, I'm not even sure what the percentages are anymore. I know I'm somewhere in the top 1% of the company. Um, I didn't do it quickly. Like, again, I think, you know, providing, and again, this is really, you know, pretty generic statement. So I mean, no offense to anybody. I didn't have to have an exorbitant amount of income at the time. I wasn't struggling working other jobs. And I know a lot of people who start a business with this company in particular are. Um, but with that said, the pace is yours. So you can, um, I'm going to quote somebody. Uh, so one of my partners, Sean Alexander, we were at one of our conventions one year, and Arnie Duncan, who is Bridget Kavanaugh's husband, came up and said something to Sean. I'm probably going to get the numbers wrong, but I'm going to just give you the gist of it. Uh, he said, "So how's your business going?" And she more or less said, "Yeah, I hit level 5 in 6 months or whatever." And he said, "Wow, how hard did you work?" And she said, "I was working 3-4 hours a week or whatever it was." And he said, "Wow, can you imagine if you worked more?" I mean, again, that's not the exact story. She'll kill me for getting it wrong, but it's the gist of it. Like, this is whatever you put into it. And
Yeah.
when I didn't grow for 2 years, it's because I wasn't putting that into it. So I would say that there's no magic number. There's no magic potion. This is not some, get rich quick scheme. This is literally a business, an incredible opportunity, and the rest is up to you. Like, it's kind of given to us to say, you have all the tools to make this as successful as you want. Now go. And you either do or you don't. And, that pace is going to be different for everybody. But I will say too, with that said, that it's important to not beat yourself up over your pace. You got to have blinders on. You can't worry about who's next to you. This is, kind of like the horses do at the racetracks.
Yeah.
You got to go. And how fast you go is completely up to you. But you can't worry about what, Susie Q next to you is doing.
Right, right. Great advice. Well, thank you so much, Shannon. This has been a wonderful conversation. I'm so happy that we got to chat and catch up as well. And I can't wait to visit you in Tampa.
Yeah, doors open. You have that on record now.
That's right. All right. Thanks, guys, for joining.